Welcome to this course. Here you will build a Battle 2D game. This game is inspired by Clash Royale and Tower Defense. So you will see 3 lines and 2 towers. Player who destroys the opponent tower first wins. This game is built by using HTML, CSS and JavaScript, but then 90% of the code will be written in JavaScript. So all what you need to know to follow along this course are variables, if statements, loops, functions, and how to work with DOM. So how to access the HTML by using the JavaScript file. Anyway, I will guide you through all this process, so even if some of these topics are unclear or unfamiliar for you, I anyway recommend to try. So let's get started. Now I'm in the Visual Studio Code. Here in the Explorer section, you can see that this is absolutely an empty project. So we will start it from scratch. And this project will have only 3 files: index.html, style.css and script.js. I won't split JavaScript file into multiple files because I want to be beginner friendly. So at first, let's create these files. So now you can see that the font of these files is green, and also after the file name we have the U letter. I see it because I'm connected to the Git, and this is because I want to store this code on the GitHub. If you are not connected to the Git, you won't see the file name in the green style. Probably it will be gray or white. If you want to store your code on GitHub as well, you can connect Git to this folder now or later. For example, when you finish your game. And the same about this tab, source control. So here you will see this number that will be changed depending on how many files we are changing. So just ignore this number. This is related to the GitHub. Now let's continue with the HTML file. At first I add an exclamation mark and then I press enter. It will create a basic HTML file. So the first thing that we can change here is the title. So this is the title of our page. So let's write something like mini battle game. Then the HTML file is the entry point. Your browser will read only the HTML file. So it means that we need to connect our style.css and script.js to the HTML file. So at first let's connect the style.css. For that I write link column CSS and then I press enter. It will automatically generate me the right tag link with the href to style.css. Then let's connect our JavaScript file. For that I write script column source and then I press enter. And now in the source property, we need to write the name of our JavaScript file, script.js. And also after the source property, we need to add a new property defer. So now all our files are connected. So then let's run our index.html file in the browser. For that, I will use the live server extension. So now on the right side, you can see the Visual Studio Code, and on the left side, you can see our website. So let's add our first element to see that we are connected to our browser. Inside of the body tag, let's add a new tag main. All elements that will be visible inside of our game, they will be inside of the main tag. And also I want to add a new class GamePage. So this class we will use in CSS, so just to change the styles of this tag. And then let's add the h1 tag. So this is the visible title of our website, so we can write the same title as we have right here. So now you should see the title in the website. So I wrote mini battle game and I see this title. And now after that, I will add a new special tag canvas. Then I will add the ID game canvas. So by using this ID, we'll be able to change elements inside of this tag by using our JavaScript file. So canvas is a special tag in HTML that helps us to draw new elements on the page. So if you don't want to use canvas, you need to make new divs if you want to create new visible elements on your page. But canvas tag has a set of functions that we can use for drawing elements on our page. And also it's used very well when you want to work with sprite sheets and animations as we have in our game. Because with canvas, we can update this page multiple times per second. So now we are finished with our index.html file. Then let's continue with our style.css file. So the first thing that I want to add here is a reset. We want to change the box sizing to border box, and this is a default reset that I use in all my CSS files. So basically it helps us to control the width of the elements in a more predictable way. It just means that if we change the units of some elements to 100 pixels, it will be literally 100 pixels. So it will include the size of these borders into the calculations. And I applied this property for the asterisk selector, which means everything. Then I changed the body tag. And now we can literally see the changes on our page because we have different background and font styles. So at first, body is the selector of our HTML, so this HTML tag. And the first property that I change here is the min width, and I put it to 100 UI units. So it just means that the body tag will have the same size as the device of our user. Then I reset the margin to be 0, and then I add 3 properties: display flags, align item center, and justify content center. All these properties help us to center the elements into the middle of our page. So now, because all these properties are applied for the body tag, everything what you see inside of the body tag will be centered on our page. So then I changed the background color, the font color, and the font family. So CSS is responsible for styles, and you can choose whatever colors you want, or you can modify the styles as you like. Then I want to change the styles for our canvas. But to see these changes, let's choose the fixed size of our canvas. So now in the index.html file, I can write the width, which is 1000 pixels, and then height 640 pixels. Now I added this property here just to visually see the styles that we will apply for canvas. Actually later, we will remove these properties because we want to control the canvas size from our JavaScript file. And then I can go to style.css, and here I add some new properties for the tag canvas. So the first property is the width, which uses the min function. So this function compares 2 values and then selects the minimum, so the smallest of them. The first value is 100%. Actually, it means the size of our browser on a user's device. So for example, now my screen is split into 2 parts, and now I know that this browser window is smaller than 1000 pixels. So for example, it is 800 pixels. So then this 100% will be replaced with the pixels value of my current browser size. So as I said, for example, this is 800 pixels. And now this function compares 2 values and takes the smallest. And then it applies this property for the width. And this is the reason why you see that my canvas width is the same as the browser width. If I expand my browser, you will see that the width of this canvas is not equal to the width of the browser, because now it uses the second property, which is 1000 pixels. So basically it means that our canvas size will be the same as the browser window until the browser window is no more than 1000 pixels. So meanwhile, I updated my VS Code, and now you see a bit different styles. But return back to our canvas tag. The next 2 properties that I added are border and border radius. So it just adds the black border around our canvas. Then I changed the background color to this green one. Then I added the box shadow. You almost don't see it, but actually behind of this canvas tag, we have a slight black shadow. And the final property is cursor, which is changed to pointer. So now when I hover over the canvas, you can see that my cursor is changed to pointer. So that's it with our styles.css file. And now let's continue with script.js file. So at first, let's start with the canvas setup. For that, I create a new variable canvas that uses the document.getElementById method. And then you can see the ID gain canvas. So this is the same ID as we added here to the canvas tag. And the next variable is the context, but I shortened it to the CTX just because we will need to write it very often. And then you can see that I take the canvas.getContext2D property. Our canvas has 2 contexts, 2D and 3D. So now we are working with 2D game. So this is the reason why I access the 2D context. And then this context has many methods that we can call to draw new elements on our canvas. So then let's add some of the global variables. I will add the canvas width, canvas height, menu height, lane height, and lane count. Now you have all these numbers in one place, and later, if you need to change any of these properties, you can just change these numbers. So for example, if you want to add a new lane, you just increase the lane count to be 4. And the same if you want to change the canvas sizes. So then I change the canvas.width and canvas.height to be these constants from our script.js file. So now it means that I control the width and height of our canvas from the JavaScript, and then if you go to index.html, we can remove these properties. And you see that nothing changes. So then let's write the logic for our background. So at first I add the function drawBackground, and then let's also call it. In this way, we will immediately see what this function does. Then I change the property fill style inside of the context. So here I choose this light green color, and then I call the function fillRect. So this function creates a new rectangle on our page. And when you create any object by using the context, it adds the color of the fill style property to this object. So this is the reason why you can see that we have a new rectangle on this page which uses this new green color. Then a bit more about fillRect function. So for that, let's talk about the coordinate system in the context property. Like in the map, we have two coordinates, x and y. The beginning point is here, which is 0. And then if you increase the number, you go to the right side of this coordinate. So it works the same as in math. Now let's talk about the y coordinate. Here, if you increase the numbers, you go down. In math, to go down, you need to increase it with negative sign. But for this function, you need to understand that you need to increase it with a positive sign. This is the main difference that you need to understand. And then let's look to this function again. So the first parameter is 0. So this is the starting point of our canvas. So it will not be the start of our page. Imagine that the start for our page is somewhere here. So this is just important to understand that 0 is the beginning of our canvas. And then I send the second property, which is menu height. So I know that in my game, I will have several lanes. And the first one will be the menu. So and this is the reason why for drawing the first lane, I want to go down by the height of this menu. I can control this number here from the global constants. And just instead of passing the hard-coded number like 0, I pass the variable which contains the number 100. And now we know what this number means. So the next property is the width of our rectangle. Here I pass the canvas width. So it just means that I want to draw a rectangle with the width exactly the same as our canvas width. And the last property that I pass is the lane height. And this property determines the height of our lane. I just control it from the global variable lane height. And now these properties are enough for fillRect function to draw a new rectangle on our page. So and this is the reason why you see this rectangle here. Then I write a very similar code for the next lane. So I again change the fill style, and then I call the fillRect property with these values. So I press the Alt-Z to wrap my code. So now we can clearly see all properties. So the first property is still 0. If we look to the x coordinate, I want to start from this initial point. Then for the white property, I have this value, menu height plus lane height. So now you can see that I just take the height of the menu and then the height of the first existing lane, and then I sum them together to get the point from which I want to start drawing my rectangle. And then I again use the properties canvas width and canvas height because I want to create a rectangle with the same sizes. Now because this rectangle also has green color, you almost don't see it. And then for the last lane, I use the same color as we had for the first lane. And then I again use the fillRect function, and the only one parameter that I change is the starting position on the white coordinate of this rectangle. So then I change the stroke style property and the line width. So at this point, I don't call any function, I just change the properties of the context. So this is the same as changing colors on your palette. Based on these properties, we will add the lines between our rectangles. So on this time, I will use a for loop because I will repeat the same action 2 times. So now on the screen, you can see that we have 2 additional lines. So at first, I have a separate constant line y. So this is the initial line y position that we will use. And this is the only one variable that actually changes. So the same as with our rectangles. So now I just extract it into a separate variable. And then I call 4 functions: begin path, then move to, line to, and stroke. So the begin path function puts the first point. Then the move to function, so moves this point to the second place. Then we use the line to function, which creates a line between these 2 points. And then I also use the stroke function that applies the stroke style to this line. So now you can see 2 different ways how we can write the code. So here I needed 3 lanes and I manually added this code. So basically I copied and pasted. And then when I needed to do the same for the lines, I created the for loop. And the only one thing that actually changes inside of this for loop is this variable line y that actually depends on the counter line. And now if you think about both these implementations, you will find that this code is much more extensible because for adding a new line, I just need to change it inside of this property. So for example, here I can change this property to 0 and then you will see 3 lines on my page, and I don't even need to copy and paste this code again. Even though that mentally the first code might be a bit easier to understand, actually you should write this code. So when you copy and paste, you need to find the pattern that changes between these variables, and then you have to control it by the counter inside of the for loop. So now if you want, you can rewrite the first part of this code that creates these rectangles with a similar for loop, and then just by changing the lane count, this function should create a new rectangle. But I would stay with both these versions just to show you the difference. Then I want to create this line in the middle of our battle. So for that, I again change the fill style property, and then I call the fill rect function. So for the first property, I use the canvas width divided by 2 minus 3. So this property puts a point on the x coordinate. So at first I divide it by 2, and then I also subtract 3 because the width of this line will be 6. So to put it correctly in the middle, I need to slightly change this line into 3 pixels. And actually I apply this math just because I don't want to hard code my numbers. I want these lines to adapt based on the user screen device. Then for the y coordinate point, I add the menu height because I want to start drawing this line right after the menu bar. Then for the width, I just put the number 6, and for the length, I put the canvas length minus the menu height. And eventually I draw this line just on our battlefield. And finally, I want to change the color of our menu. So for that, I again change the fill style, and then I call the fill rect function. On this time, the parameters are very simple, just because we draw this rectangle from the start of our canvas. The next function that we will implement is draw lane labels. Let's also call it right after we wrote our function, so we can visually see our changes. And on this time, I wrote the function as you should write, but I won't explain it a lot because it uses the same concepts as the draw background function. Just you can see that visually it adds this text like lane 1, lane 2, and lane 3. And also it is written by using the for loop, so if you need to add new lanes, you just need to change the global variable lane count, and then this function will automatically add the label lane 4. In this episode, we draw our battlefield by using the canvas functions in JavaScript. In the next episode, we will write our game loop, and also we'll get the properties from the mouse.